Chapter 6, Lesson 5, Essential Question. How can you use a common denominator to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators? Looking at Unlock the Problem. Malia bought shell beads and glass beads to weave into designs in her basket. She bought 1/4 of a pound of shell beads and 3/8 of a pound of glass beads. How many pounds of beads did she buy? First, you need to underline what you're being asked to find and circle the important information. Press pause. You should have underlined how many pounds of beads did she buy, and then you also should have circled 1/4 of a pound and 3/8 of a pound. And we know that this is addition because it's asking right here where it says how many. They're talking about total wise, and so if you're trying to find a total of all together, you are adding. So we're taking our two fractions of 1/4 plus 3/8, and in this direction it says write your answer in the simplest form. So that's telling me that after I do everything, I need to look at my answer and see if I can reduce it or simplify it. Now we're going to go through two ways of solving this problem. First, we're going to do one way, and this way is the ECD way, the easiest common denominator of just multiplying the denominators. So we're going to find a common denominator by multiplying the bottom numbers, the denominators. That is 4 and 8, and so 4 times 8 equals 32. So that's going to be our new common denominator. Now we need to multiply our numbers to get our equivalent fractions. So the directions here just say use the common denominator to write equivalent fractions with like denominators. Then you add and reduce, or write your answer in simplest form. Now they've written their problem vertically, so the cross and switch that we've been practicing won't necessarily work vertically, but you can still do the same idea. And so, because I would like you to write your problems vertically, organizationally wise, it'll just be cleaner. So we have 1/4 plus 3/8. Now, if we were just multiplying our denominator, our 8 right here, we would need to just cross up. So we need to multiply the 4 times the 8, because that's what we have to do to get 32. And we also need to multiply the numerator by 8. So this means that our new one will be 8 over 32. And then, let me just circle this black right here so that you know where it came from. And then, what did you have to do to your 8 here to get the denominator of 32? Well, you had to multiply it times the 4. So let's go ahead and write 4 right here. And I'll circle my 4 in red because that's where it came from. And then you just multiply it out. 3 times 4 equals 12. 8 times 4 equals 32. Now that we have a like denominator, we just move that straight down, so 32. And then we need to add our numerators, 8 and 12. Well, 8 plus 12 equals 20. These are both even numbers, so they have 2 in common for sure, but do they have any other numbers in common, any other factors that are the same? They have 4 in common. So if I take 20 divided by 4, that will give me 5. And if I take 32 divided by 4, that will give me 8. And we divided by 4 to make my simplest form. So that's one way. That's using the ECD. The other way is to find the least common denominator using the least common multiple. So normally I would say take your two factors, we have 4 and 8, create your tree, and write out your multiples. Your first step is to list your multiples. However, I can see right away that 4 and 8, well, 8 is a multiple of 4. So I don't need to do anything to 3/8. I can just scoot it straight across. So I'm going to leave 3/8, and now I only need to change the top fraction so that we have the same denominator. And what do I need to do to this 4 to make it an 8? I need to multiply it times 2. That means I need to do the same thing to the numerator. And so then I just multiply straight across. 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 equals 8. Now we have the same denominator. We bring our 8 down, and we add our numerators, 2 plus 3, and that gives me 5. Now you can see that we reduce to 5/8, and this way we don't need to reduce. So both of these are ways to solve the same problem, because you end up with the answer of 5/8 of a pound of beads were bought. Just in case that you did not see that 4 and 8 were multiples of each other right off, let's finish filling in this. So if I was making my factor chart, I would start with the times 1, and then I'd work at times 2 and times 3. So filling this out, 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 2 is 16. I don't even need to go on to 3 because I see 8 on both sides already, so that's how I know that the common denominator is 8. So now I want you to look at the explain, and it says how you know whether your answer is reasonable. Estimating is always a good way to prove whether your answer is reasonable. So write a sentence on how you can use estimation to prove your answer is reasonable. Use those benchmark fractions, 0, 1/2, and 1. My sentence is that 1/4 rounds to 0 and 3/8 rounds to 1/2, because 3 is pretty close to 4, which 4/8 is 1/2 of 8. And so then I would see that 0 plus 1/2 equals 1/2, and 5/8 is really close to 4/8 as well. So this proves that it is reasonable. Looking at another example, this is subtraction. Pay attention to the operation signs. So when subtracting two fractions with unlike denominators, we follow the same steps as when adding two fractions. However, instead of adding, you just subtract. So go through the steps to create a common denominator, and then make sure you write your answer in the simplest form. Go through just the left-hand side of the example. I chose to just multiply times 2 to make 5 equal 10, because I can see that 10 is a multiple of 5. Now I could have just multiplied them together and had the denominator of 50, but I chose to go with 10. Either one will end up in the same reduced simplest form fraction. So right now I ended up with 9/10, because I didn't need to change this one at all. So I just brought it over, minus 4/10. So that's 9 minus 4 equals 5, and we just bring our 10 straight down. But 5/10 can be simplified. What can go into each of them? Well, 5 can go into 5, and 5 can go into 10. So if I go 5 divided by 5, that equals 1, and 10 divided by 5 equals 2. I could also see directly that 5 is half of 10. So now that we have done all of our work, we need to do the second part. Describe the steps you took to solve the problem. There are three major steps with the fourth one at the bottom that you have taken. So press pause and fill in 1, 2, 3, and your 4 steps. The 4 main steps that you take are 1. Find the common denominator. 2. Write the equivalent fractions. 3. Subtract like fractions. They're like fractions because they have the same denominator. And then the last step is to simplify. Now you need to write a sentence explaining why your answer is reasonable. I very quickly just said if I estimate 1 minus a half equals a half. 9/10 is almost a 1, and 2/5 is almost in the middle between 0 and a half, so I chose to round up to a half. Now go ahead, work on the share and show. You need to pay attention to whether you're adding or subtracting. Find a common denominator, add or subtract, and then make sure that you simplify. Press pause while you work. For this first problem, I showed you all the steps. I used the least common multiple because I could see that 12 is a multiple of 3, so I only needed to change one fraction. And then I rewrote my equivalent fractions and added them together and got 9/12. And then I needed to reduce. I saw that both of them were divisible by 3, so I divided them by 3 and ended up with my simplified answer of 3/4. For numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I am only going to be writing the reduced answer. So if you use a different common denominator, it's okay. No matter what you do, your fraction should reduce to the same answer that I show you. You'll also see that some of them don't reduce. So now, as you've checked your share and show, if you got any of them incorrect, please make sure that you added if it said add or subtracted if it said subtract. Also double check that you've reduced your fractions. So go ahead, work on your exit ticket and then the on your own and problem solving sections.